The great hall of the Galactic Council was full of noise and strange sounds. Hundreds of alien beings from across the galaxy sat in their special seats, each one different from the next. Some looked like giant insects, others like living crystals, and some were just floating balls of light. They all had one thing in common today. They were laughing. Ambassador Zixtal, from the Etherian Federation, stood at the center of the hall. His body was made of what looked like living glass, and when he spoke, his voice sounded like wind chimes in a storm. He held up a small data pad and shook his head in what might have been amusement. "The humans from Sol 3 have sent us another request," he announced to the crowd. "They want to join our war against the Voidborn. They think they can help us fight." The laughter got louder. A huge bug-like creature named Hive Queen Velinara clicked her sharp teeth together. "The Deathworlders want to help us. Their planet is a nightmare. The weather there would kill most of us in minutes. The gravity would crush our bones. How could anything useful come from such a terrible place?" More laughter filled the hall. These aliens had been fighting a war for over 100 years, and they were losing badly. The Voidborn Collective was a massive enemy force that ate up planets like candy. They had better weapons, more ships, and seemed to appear out of nowhere. The civilized races of the galaxy had tried everything, but nothing worked. High above the main hall, in a small observation room, Captain John Blake watched the meeting through a hidden camera feed. He was a tall man with gray hair and tired eyes. Next to him stood Commander Lisa Martinez, a woman with dark hair and a face that showed she was angry.
"Listen to them,"
Martinez said through gritted teeth. "They call us primitive. They have no idea what we've been through." Blake nodded slowly. Earth had been labeled as a Class 12 Deathworld by the Galactic survey teams. This was the worst rating possible. It meant the planet was so dangerous that most alien life forms would die, just from landing there. The weather was wild and unpredictable. There were diseases that could kill in hours. Natural disasters happened all the time. Animals that would eat anything that moved. And the gravity was so strong that most aliens needed special suits, just to walk around. But humans had been born there. They had grown up fighting the planet itself every day of their lives. While other species had evolved on gentle worlds with perfect weather and no real dangers, humans had learned to survive by being tough, smart, and willing to do whatever it took to live another day. "Sir," called Lieutenant Jake Murphy from his station, "we're getting the official answer from the Council." Blake walked over and read the message on the screen. It was short and mean. Request denied. "Deathworld species are too violent for civilized warfare. Your primitive technology and aggressive nature would cause more problems than help." Blake looked around at his crew. He saw the same mix of anger and determination in their faces that he felt in his own heart. These were good people who had volunteered to leave Earth and help fight in a war that wasn't even theirs. They had spent years building ships and training, all to help species that now laughed at them. "They want to see what Deathworlders can do," Blake said quietly. "Let's show them." Meanwhile, far away at the edge of the galaxy, the war was going very badly. Admiral Rex Stoll of the Aquarian Star Navy floated in his command tank, looking at reports from the latest battles. His people were fish-like beings who lived in water-filled ships. They were smart and peaceful, but they were dying. Voidborn had taken 3 more worlds just this month. Their black ships would appear without warning, destroy everything that fought back, and then strip the planets of all life. The Aquarians had tried to fight, but their weapons barely scratched the enemy ships. Their battle plans were too predictable. The Voidborn seemed to know exactly what they would do before they did it. Rextal looked at the data about the humans again. These Deathworlders had somehow built ships that could travel faster than light. They had weapons that looked crude, but might actually work. And they had something that the civilized races had lost long ago. They knew how to fight dirty, perhaps. He thought to himself, we should not be so quick to judge them. Back on Earth, in the underground command center in Colorado, General Robert Kane was looking at the same message that Blake had received. Kane was a big man with scars on his face. From the resource wars that had ended just 10 years ago, he had spent his whole life fighting first against other humans, then against the planet itself, and now he wanted to fight for something bigger. "They rejected us again," said Dr. Helen Carter, the chief scientist on the space program. Was a small woman with intelligent eyes who had helped design the human ships. "Maybe we should just focus on defending Earth." Kane shook his head. "No, there are billions of innocent people out there dying while we sit here. The Voidborn will come for Earth eventually anyway. It's better to fight them out there than wait for them to come here." The truth was that humans had advantages that the other species didn't understand. Life on Earth had been a constant battle against everything: the weather, the animals, the diseases, even other humans. This had made humans incredibly adaptable. They could think fast, change their plans in the middle of a fight, and never give up even when things looked hopeless. Other species fought wars like they played games with rules and honor and predictable moves. Humans fought wars like they had fought to survive on Earth with whatever worked, wherever it worked. And for as long as it took, the Voidborn had been winning because they had better technology than the civilized races. But they had never fought. Anyone who didn't follow the rules had never faced an enemy that would use their own strength against them or turn their advantages into weaknesses. "Get me a line to all our ships," Kane ordered. "It's time to show the galaxy what humans can do." In space, Captain Blake received the message from Earth. It was simple and direct. "Ignore the Council. Find the war. Fight." Blake smiled for the first time in days. This was what he had been waiting for. The chance to prove that humans belonged in the galaxy, that they could make a difference. That being from a Deathworld wasn't a weakness, but a strength. He turned to his crew. "All hands, prepare for jump. We're going to find ourselves a war." The ship's engines hummed to life. The Liberty's Edge, humanity's first real warship, began to move toward the stars. Behind it, 11 other human ships followed. They were small compared to the massive vessels of the Galactic fleets. But they carried something that no other ships in the galaxy had: crews who had learned to fight on the most dangerous planet. In known space, they had been laughed at, rejected, and dismissed, but they were going to war anyway. When they arrived, the galaxy would learn what it meant to fight alongside Deathworlders. The stars waited ahead, cold and distant. Somewhere out there, the Voidborn were destroying worlds and killing billions. The civilized races were losing badly, too stuck in their old ways to adapt. But change was coming. 12 small ships from a violent little planet were about to enter. The greatest war in galactic history, and nothing would ever be the same again. The alarm bells on the bridge of the Terran Defiant rang so loud that Commander Lisa Martinez had to shout to be heard. Through the main window, she could see the most horrible sight in the galaxy. 47 black ships, each one the size of a city, were attacking the peaceful planet of New Verdant. "Ma'am," called Ensign Chris Turner from his station, "the local defense fleet is gone. All of it. The Voidborn destroyed everything in less than an hour." "What?" Martinez looked at the tactical display on her screen. The numbers were bad, very bad. 12 human ships against 47 Voidborn vessels. Any sane military commander would run away. But Martinez had grown up in the slums of Detroit, where running away usually meant dying anyway. "All ships, this is Defiant Actual," she broadcast. "To the other human vessels, we're outnumbered, but we've faced worse odds before. Remember what we learned on Earth. Trust your training and show these Voidborn what happens when they hurt innocent people." The 12 human ships broke apart and scattered in different directions. To anyone watching, it looked like they were running away in panic. But this was actually a human battle tactic called controlled chaos. Each ship was going to attack from a different angle, making it impossible for the enemy to predict where the next strike would come from. Captain Tony Richards and the New York's Fury dove his ship straight down toward the biggest Voidborn vessel. This was insane by normal standards. The enemy ship was 10 times bigger and had weapons that could destroy his ship with one shot. But Richards had learned street fighting before he joined the military. He knew that sometimes the best way to fight a bigger enemy was to get so close they couldn't use their best weapons. The Voidborn ship tried to turn its main guns on him, but Richards was already too close. He flew his ship along the hull of the enemy vessel, using it as a shield, while his own weapons targeted the engine ports and weapon systems. It was like a mosquito attacking an elephant. But the mosquito knew exactly where to bite. Lieutenant Commander Amy Foster took a completely different approach. Instead of attacking the main fleet, she used the planet's moon as a slingshot. She accelerated her ship, the Pacific Storm, 2 dangerous speeds, and then crashed into the side of a Voidborn command vessel. The impact should have destroyed both ships, but Foster had calculated everything perfectly. Her ship tore through the alien hull like a bullet through paper. The Voidborn had never seen anything like this. For over a century, they had been fighting civilized races who used proper military tactics. Ships stayed in formation. Battles followed predictable patterns. Commanders gave orders and troops followed them exactly. Humans fought like their planet had taught them to fight, with desperate creativity and complete disregard for what was supposed to be impossible. Captain Steve Collins found himself in the worst possible situation. His ship had lost its main weapons and was surrounded by 3 enemy vessels. Any normal commander would surrender or try to escape. Instead, Collins did something that shocked everyone, including his own crew. "All hands, abandon ship," he ordered. "Get to the escape pods now." His crew looked at him like he was crazy, but they followed orders. As soon as the last escape pod was away, Collins flew his damaged ship straight into the hangar bay of the nearest Voidborn vessel. Then he detonated his fusion reactor. The explosion was visible from the planet's surface. It destroyed not just the ship Collins had targeted, but damaged 3 others so badly they had to retreat. Collins had traded his life and his ship for 4 enemy vessels. It was the kind of sacrifice that civilized races talked about, but rarely actually made. The battle turned into complete chaos. Human ships appeared and disappeared like ghosts, striking at weak points the Voidborn had never thought to protect. When their regular weapons failed, human crews started using anything they could find as weapons. Mining charges became bombs. Atmospheric processors became missiles. One crew even used their food replicator to create a chemical weapon. Commander Martinez watched the battle from her bridge and felt something she hadn't felt in years: hope. Her ships were smaller and less advanced than the enemy, but they were winning. The Voidborn were starting to retreat, and some of their largest vessels were dead in space. "Target the command ship," she ordered. "All remaining vessels, concentrate. Fire on the big one in the center." The Voidborn command ship was a massive black pyramid that had been directing the entire attack. It was heavily shielded and armed with weapons that could destroy a moon. But it had one weakness. It was too big to move quickly. 3 human ships attacked it at once from different directions. The Pacific Storm, badly damaged, but still fighting, hit it from above. The Chicago's Revenge attacked from the side, while the Boston Tea Party came at it from below. The combined attack overwhelmed the command ship's defenses. As the command ship began to explode, the remaining Voidborn vessels fled the system. They had never retreated from a battle before, but they had never fought humans before either. When the shooting stopped, Martinez looked around at what was left of her small fleet. Of the 12 ships that had entered the battle, only 7 were still working. 5 ships and their crews were gone forever. But they had done something that no one in the galaxy had managed to do in over a century. They had defeated a Voidborn attack fleet. On the planet below, 2 billion Malari civilians were still alive because of what the humans had done. The Malari were a peaceful species who looked like tall, thin plants with faces. They had never seen violence before the Voidborn came, and they had never seen anything like the human rescue operations that followed. Human shuttles landed on the planet's surface, and crews in environmental suits began helping with evacuations and medical aid. These were the same primitive Deathworlders that the Galactic Council had said were too violent for civilized society. But they were risking their lives to help people they had never met before. News of the battle spread through the galaxy faster than light itself. For the first time in decades, someone had not just survived a Voidborn attack, they had actually won. The impossible had happened, and it had been done by the species that everyone had been laughing at. In the Galactic Council chambers, the laughter had stopped. Ambassador Zixtel stared at the battle reports in disbelief. The humans had lost 5 ships, but they had destroyed or damaged over 20 Voidborn vessels. More importantly, they had saved a planet that everyone else had already written off as lost. "How is this possible?" asked High Queen Velenara. "Their ships are primitive. Their weapons are crude. They should have been destroyed in the first few minutes." Admiral Rextol of the Aquarian Star Navy was the first to understand. "They don't fight like us," he said quietly. "We follow rules, use proper tactics. We fight with honor. They fight to win, no matter what it takes." The truth was becoming clear to those who were willing to see it. The humans weren't winning because they had better technology. They were winning because they had something that the civilized races had lost: the willingness to do whatever was necessary to protect innocent life. On Earth, General Robert Kane read the battle reports with satisfaction. This was just the beginning. The galaxy was about to learn what humans could really do when they put their minds to it. "Send a message to all our ships," he ordered. "Tell them well done, and tell them to find the next battle. We're not done yet." In space, the surviving human ships regrouped and began moving toward the next crisis. The war was far from over. But for the first time, it looked like it might actually be winnable. The Deathworlders had entered the Galactic War, and everything was about to change. The news about the human victory at New Verdant spread across the galaxy like wildfire. In every star system, on every space station, aliens who had never heard of humans before were suddenly talking about the Deathworlders who had done the impossible. They had beaten the Voidborn in a straight fight. In the Galactic Council building, emergency meetings were being held around the clock. Representatives who had been laughing at humans just weeks before were now arguing about what this victory meant. Some were excited. Others were scared. All of them were confused. Admiral Rextol of the Aquarian Star Navy was not confused. He was angry. For 40 years, his people had been dying in this war. They'd lost entire worlds, billions of lives, and they were no closer to victory than when they started. But these humans had figured out in one battle what his entire fleet had failed to learn in 4 decades, against direct orders from his superiors. Rextol sent a coded message to Captain John Blake aboard the Liberty's Edge. The message was simple: "We need to talk." They met at a neutral space station in the Proxima Centauri system, far from the watching eyes of galactic politics. Rextol arrived in a small, fast ship that looked like a flying fish tank. Blake came alone in a shuttle, trusting that this alien admiral was as tired of losing as he seemed. The meeting room was filled with water for Rextol and air for Blake, the force field between them that allowed them to talk. Rextol was old by Aquarian standards, his blue scales scarred from many battles. Unlike the fancy politicians in the council, this being had the look of someone who had seen too much death. "Your species has done something amazing," Rextol said, his words translated by a computer. "My people have been fighting the Voidborn for 40 years. We have lost everything that mattered to us, and we are no closer to winning than when we started." Blake studied the alien admiral carefully. There was something in Rextol's large, fish-like eyes that he recognized. It was the same look he had seen in the mirror after losing friends in battle. This alien understood what war really cost. "What do you want from us?" Blake asked. Training Rextol replied without hesitation. "Your tactics, your strategies, your way of thinking about war. In exchange, I can give you intelligence about Voidborn movements, their technology, their weak points." Blake thought about it for a moment. The Galactic Council had rejected humanity's offer to help. But here was someone who actually wanted to learn from them, someone who understood that pride was less important than saving lives. "Big deal," Blake said. The partnership started small and secret. Rextol's ships would scout ahead and gather information about Voidborn positions. Then human ships would use that information to plan attacks that the enemy would never see coming. Captain Lucy Adams led the first joint operation. She commanded a squadron of 6 fast human ships that worked with 2 Aquarian reconnaissance vessels. Their target was a Voidborn supply depot in the Kepler 438 system. The depot was supposed to be heavily defended. But Adams had learned something important from studying the Voidborn. They were very good at fighting big battles with lots of ships. But they were terrible at dealing with small, fast attacks that came from unexpected directions. Adams split her ships into 3 groups. The first group attacked the depot's main defenses head-on, making a lot of noise and drawing attention. While the Voidborn were focused on this obvious threat, The second group snuck around behind the depot and destroyed the fuel storage tanks. The third group hit the communication center, making sure that no distress signals could be sent. The entire operation took less than 20 minutes. When it was over, the Voidborn had lost months' worth of supplies and had no idea how it had happened. The human ships disappeared before reinforcements could arrive. Rex, though, watched the operation from his command ship and felt something he had not felt in years. Hope. These humans fought like no one he had ever seen. They were creative, unpredictable, and absolutely ruthless when they needed to be. "How do you think of these tactics?" he asked Commander Pete Johnson, who had been assigned to train Aquarian crews. Johnson was a big man from Texas who had served in Earth's final resource wars. He thought about the question carefully before answering. "On Earth, we had to fight everything," he said. "The weather, the animals, other humans, even the ground we walked on. We learned to use whatever works. Learn that fair fights are for people who can afford to lose." Hey, the joint human Aquarian? Forces began winning battles that should have been impossible. But it was not just the tactics that made the difference. It was the way humans fought that inspired their alien allies and terrified their enemies. Dr. Helen Carter, a scientist who had joined the military effort to study alien technology, discovered something important about why humans were so effective. She presented her findings to a meeting of allied commanders from 6 different species. "It is not just your tactics," she explained. "It is your entire approach to survival." Every other species in the galaxy evolved on worlds that were basically paradise compared to Earth. They never had to deal with constant threats. They never had to develop the kind of adaptability that comes from living on a planet that tries to kill you every day. The alien commanders listened carefully. Them came from worlds with gentle weather, abundant food, and few dangerous animals. The idea of a planet that was actively hostile to life was hard for them to understand. "Your species has been shaped by millions of years of facing impossible odds," Carter continued. "That is why you never give up. That is why you can improvise solutions that no one else thinks of. That is why you fight with an intensity that scares your enemies." Meanwhile, the Voidborn were having problems of their own. Their entire expansion had been based on the idea that they were superior to any possible enemy. The appearance of humans had destroyed that assumption. Their leadership was struggling to adapt. Hivemind Construct 7742. One of the Voidborn's main tactical computers analyzed data from dozens of battles with human forces. The patterns made no sense according to normal military thinking. Humans would give up strategic advantages to save civilians. They would fight to the death when retreat would be smart. It would show mercy to defeated enemies, even when it put them in danger. They are chaos given form, the construct reported to its superiors. They do not fight for territory or resources like other species. They fight for ideas we do not understand. Honor, freedom, the protection of those they consider innocent. This makes them impossible to predict and very dangerous. As word of the human Aquarian successes spread, other species began to quietly reach out. The Kethver, who had been among the loudest mockers of human abilities, suddenly found themselves facing a massive Voidborn invasion of their home systems. Hive Queen Velinara, swallowing her pride, sent a secret message to Captain Blake. "We require assistance. Name your price." Blake's response was immediate and simple. "No price. We are coming." The Battle of Kethver Prime became the turning point of the entire war. For the first time, a major Voidborn invasion was not just stopped, but completely destroyed. Human forces, now working with Aquarian Kethver and a dozen other species, had developed a combined fighting style that was devastating to the enemy. But victory came at a terrible cost. Commander Lisa Martinez, who had led the final assault on the Voidborn command ship, was killed when her vessel was caught in the explosion of the enemy flagship. Her last message was heard by ships across the entire battle zone. "Tell them we held the line," she transmitted as her ship broke apart. "Tell them the Deathworlders held the line." The funeral for Martinez was attended by representatives from 20 different species. The woman who had grown up fighting in the streets of Detroit was honored as a hero by beings she had never met. It was the first time in galactic history that so many different species had come together to honor a single individual. After the ceremony, Blake stood alone in the observation deck of his ship, looking out at the stars. The war was far from over, but something had changed. The galaxy was no longer fighting alone. The Deathworlders had joined the fight, and they were teaching everyone else how to win. The war had changed completely. What started as a desperate fight for survival had become something bigger. The Galactic Council, which had once laughed at humans, now depended on them. The species that had been dismissed as primitive Deathworlders had become the backbone of the entire galactic resistance. General Robert? Kane stood before the full Galactic Council for the first time. The huge chamber that had once echoed with laughter at human expense was now completely silent. Hundreds of alien beings looked at the human general with a mixture of respect and fear. They had learned that underestimating humans was a deadly mistake. "The Voidborn are learning," Kane reported, his voice carrying the weight of command. "They are studying our tactics and developing ways to fight us. If we want to win this war, we need to think bigger." Ambassador Zixtal of the Etherian Federation, who had been one of the loudest critics of human membership, now leaned forward with interest. His crystalline body reflected the lights of the chamber as he spoke. "What do you suggest, General?" Kane's proposal was so bold that it shocked even the humans in the room. He called it Operation Deathworld, instead of just defending against Voidborn attacks. The Allied forces would take the fight directly to the enemy's home territory. But the plan required something that no civilized species had ever attempted: a direct assault on the Voidborn core worlds. "You are asking us to fight on planets that will kill us just by being there," protested Council Member Thexine of the Silicon Collective. "The radiation levels alone would destroy most of our species within hours." "Not humans," Kane replied. "Simply, Earth's radiation belt exposed our ancestors to cosmic rays for millions of years. We have natural resistance. Our immune systems can handle biological warfare because we have been fighting viruses and bacteria that would kill other species. Our minds do not break under pressure the way civilized beings do." The plan caused huge arguments in the council. Many species thought it was impossible. Others thought it was too dangerous. But desperation had made them willing to consider ideas they would never have thought about before. A joint task force was put together, with humans leading the assault teams while other species provided technology and supplies. It was the largest military operation in galactic history, and it was being led by beings from a planet that most of the galaxy had never heard of until recently. Captain Diana Ross commanded the assault ship Earthbreaker, which would lead the first wave into Voidborn space. Her ship and crew had been specially prepared for the mission, with extra radiation shielding and biological protection systems. But even with all the improvements, the environment they were entering would test every limit of human endurance. Ross was a veteran of the Martian mining wars, where humans had learned to fight in environments that would kill most other species. She had spent years working in radioactive asteroid fields and poisonous gas clouds. If anyone could lead this mission, it was her. The first Voidborn core world they found was designated Target Alpha. It was a planet that had been scoured by radioactive storms for thousands of years. The surface temperature was 800 degrees Fahrenheit. The atmosphere was full of toxic metals and acid compounds. The gravity was almost 3 times stronger than Earth's. Most importantly, it was populated by mechanical constructs that could operate in conditions that would instantly kill organic life. "Just like home," joked Sergeant Mike Torres as his Marine unit prepared for the planetary assault. It was not really a joke. The extreme conditions that made Target Alpha impossible for most species to survive were similar to the environmental challenges that had shaped human evolution. Humans had learned to live in places that other species could not even visit. The assault was unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen. Human forces fought through radioactive storms that would have killed any other species in minutes. They used the planet's hostile environment as a weapon against the Voidborn. They accomplished missions that had been considered impossible by every military expert in the galaxy. When their equipment broke down from the radiation, they fixed it with whatever materials they could find. When the toxic atmosphere ate through their protective suits, they improvised new ones using Voidborn technology. When the gravity made normal movement impossible, they learned to fight in conditions that would have crushed most alien soldiers. Lieutenant Sarah Mitchell led a squad that was trapped in a radiation storm for 6 hours. They had nothing but emergency shelter and their own endurance to keep them alive in conditions that would have killed most galactic species within minutes. When they finally reached their target, they discovered that the Voidborn had never considered the possibility that organic beings could operate in such an environment. The psychological impact of the victory was enormous. For the first time in the war, the Voidborn had lost a core world. Now the message was clear to everyone in the galaxy. Nowhere was safe from the Deathworld humans and their allies. But the victory came with a shocking discovery. The Voidborn were not just conquerors trying to build an empire. They were desperate refugees fleeing from something even worse than themselves. Deep in the captured data files, human scientists found references to something called the Harvest. Karen White, the lead scientist studying the captured information, called an emergency meeting with all the top military commanders. Her face was pale as she presented her findings to the assembled leaders. "We are not just fighting an invasion," she reported. "We are fighting a species that is running from something that scared them enough to abandon their home reality. The Harvest is some kind of cosmic threat that has been chasing the Voidborn across multiple dimensions." The revelation changed everything. The galaxy was not just facing a war of conquest. It was facing the first wave of a multidimensional crisis that threatened the existence of all organic life. General Kane studied the data carefully. The Harvest appeared to be some kind of force that consumed entire realities. It had already destroyed the Voidborn's original dimension and countless others. Now it was following them into this one. "How long do we have?" Kane asked. 6 months. "Maybe less," Dr. White replied. "The dimensional barriers are weakening. Whatever drove the Voidborn here is using the same pathways they created. When it arrives, it will make the Voidborn look like a minor problem." The news spread quickly through the Allied fleets. Soldiers who had been celebrating their victory over the Voidborn suddenly realized they were facing something much worse. Some alien crews panicked, others fell into despair. But the humans had a different reaction, Good said Captain Ross. When she heard the news, "Now we know what we are really fighting." This was the human way. When faced with an impossible challenge, they did not give up or run away. They got angry and started planning how to win. It was the same attitude that had carried them through ice ages, volcanic eruptions, and countless wars on their deadly homeworld. Admiral Rexstool, who would become one of humanity's closest allies, was amazed by their reaction. "How can you be calm about this?" he asked Captain Blake. "This thing has destroyed entire realities. How can anyone fight something like that?" Blake smiled grimly. "Rex, we come from a planet that tried to kill us every day for millions of years. We learned a long time ago that there is no such thing as an unwinnable fight, or just fights that require more creativity than others." The Allied forces began preparing for the greatest battle in the history of the universe. They had 6 months to figure out how to fight an enemy that consumed realities. It seemed impossible, but then again, so had beating the Voidborn. And at the center of it all were the humans. The species that had been laughed at and dismissed. They were about to face the ultimate test of what it meant to be Deathworlders. The discovery of the Harvest sent shockwaves through every species in the galaxy. The Voidborn, for all their terrible power, were just refugees running from something much worse. Deep space monitoring stations began detecting massive gravitational waves at the edge of the galaxy, proof that whatever had driven the Voidborn into this reality was following them. General Robert Kane stood in the command center of the massive space station Defiance, now serving as headquarters for all Allied forces. Around him, representatives from every major species in the galaxy studied the incoming data with growing fear. "The dimensional barriers are breaking down," reported Dr. Karen White, her voice tight with worry. "Whatever is coming through is using the same holes the Voidborn made when they arrived. We have maybe 6 months before the first wave gets here." The numbers were terrifying. The Harvest was a multidimensional force that ate entire realities. It had already destroyed the Voidborn's home dimension and countless others. Now it was coming for theirs, and there was nowhere left to run. "We need to work with the Voidborn," Kane announced. causing gasps and angry shouts throughout the room. I know how that sounds, but we are not fighting a war anymore. We're fighting for the survival of all life in this reality. The idea was met with outrage from many species. The Kethver had lost billions to voidborn attacks. The Aquarians had seen entire worlds stripped of life. The thought of allying with their destroyers seemed impossible, but Admiral John Blake, now promoted and serving as Kane's chief advisor, had a different view. The voidborn fight like machines because they had to, he explained to the angry crowd. They have been running from the harvest for so long that they forgot how to be anything else. But underneath all that technology, they are still living. Beings they still feel fear, still want to survive. The first contact with the voidborn leadership was arranged through captured communication equipment. The thing that appeared on screen was unlike anything the galaxy had seen before. It was part organic, part machine, scarred by dimensional travel, and desperate with the knowledge of what was coming. "We are Construct Prime," the entity spoke through translated harmonics. "We have fought the harvest across 17 different realities. We have failed 17 times. Your species interests us, humans of Earth. You fight as we once fought, before we learned that honor was a luxury we could not afford." The negotiations were difficult and filled with tension. Trust was impossible between species that had been killing each other for over a century. But necessity made cooperation the only choice. The Voidborn had technology and knowledge that the galaxy needed. The galactic species had something the Voidborn had lost, the ability to think beyond pure survival, and at the center of it all were the humans, the species that had been dismissed as primitive Deathworlders. They had become the bridge between civilized society and desperate survival. Understanding both the nobility of fighting for others and the harsh reality of doing whatever was necessary to win, Admiral Benat Diana Ross led the first joint human Voidborn operation, a scouting mission to the dimensional barriers where the harvest was expected to emerge. Her ship, the Terra's Wrath, was equipped with both human creativity and Voidborn technology, creating a hybrid vessel that was uniquely suited for the impossible mission ahead. "The barriers are worse than we thought," she reported after returning from the edge of reality itself. "The harvest is not just coming through. It is already here, testing our defenses, learning our weaknesses." The final battle began not with a massive invasion, but with reality itself starting to break down. Stars began to flicker and die. Planets vanished into dimensional holes. The very fabric of space and time began to unravel like an old piece of cloth. But the galaxy was ready. Human tactics had been shared with every species, creating a unified military doctrine that combined the best of every culture. Voidborn technology had been adapted for organic use, giving the defenders weapons that could fight on a multi-dimensional scale. Most importantly, the defenders had something the harvest had never encountered before, a species that had learned to thrive in impossible conditions. It saw every challenge as something to be overcome rather than something to run from. The war that followed was unlike anything in galactic history. Battles were fought in dimensions where the laws of physics did not work normally, where time moved backwards and space folded in on itself. But wherever the fighting was hardest, wherever the conditions were most impossible, human forces were there, holding the line. Captain Lucy Adams led a squad of volunteers on a mission into the harvest itself, using modified Voidborn technology to survive in a realm where reality was constantly being rewritten. The environment inside the harvest was beyond description, a place where thoughts became solid, where the past and future existed at the same time, where the very concept of existence was under attack. "We are not just fighting for our galaxy anymore," Adams transmitted back to the fleet. "We are fighting for the right of life to exist, and we are going to win." The turning point came when humanity's greatest advantage finally revealed itself. The harvest consumed realities by forcing its own rules on them, its own order. But humans, shaped by life on a chaotic Deathworld, did not follow rules. They broke them, bent them, and ignored them when necessary. In the heart of the harvest, where reality itself was being torn apart and rebuilt, human crews found ways to survive that should have been impossible. They adapted to environments that changed from moment to moment. They fought enemies that existed in multiple dimensions at once. They held their positions when the very ground beneath them was being rewritten by hostile forces. Sergeant Mike Torres found himself fighting in a place where gravity changed direction every few seconds, and the air was made of liquid fire. Instead of being defeated by these impossible conditions, he used them as weapons against the Harvest's forces. When an enemy appeared above him, he waited for gravity to shift and then attacked from what had become the new down. Lieutenant Sarah Mitchell discovered that her thoughts could affect reality inside the Harvest. Instead of being driven insane by this knowledge, she used it to create weapons and defenses that existed only because she believed they should. Her squad held a position for 12 hours in a place where time moved backwards, fighting enemies that attacked them before they had even arrived. The final victory came not through superior technology or overwhelming force, but through something much simpler. The Harvest could adapt to any weapon, any strategy, any defense. But it could not adapt to beings that thrived on chaos and made strength from adversity. When the Harvest tried to impose its order on human forces, they simply refused to accept it when it tried to break their will with impossible challenges. They treated those challenges as just another day on Earth. When it tried to consume their reality, they created new ones through sheer stubbornness and refusal to give up. In the end, the Harvest did not retreat or surrender. It simply moved on to find realities that would follow its rules. The galaxy was safe, but the cost had been enormous. Entire star systems were gone. Species had been lost forever. The survivors were left to rebuild in a universe that had been fundamentally changed, but rebuild they did, with humans leading the effort. The species that had once been mocked as primitive Deathworlders had become the guardians of galactic civilization. They had proven that sometimes the greatest strength comes not from perfect conditions, but from learning to thrive despite impossible odds. Years later, the Galactic Council voted unanimously to build the Sol Memorial Station in Earth's orbit. The inscription, written in every galactic language, read simply, "To the humans of Earth, who taught us that strength comes not from avoiding hardship, but from embracing it." They laughed at Earth, then the Deathworlders taught them all how to fight. And on Earth, in the academies where the next generation of human warriors trained, the motto was simple: from the Deathworld for the galaxy. The universe was vast and full of dangers, but it was also full of those who had learned that no challenge was too great when you refused to accept defeat.